For our third lesson of our Algebra 1 review, we're going to be solving linear equations. And our objective in this one is to write and graph the equation of a line, which is a linear equation. Once again, this is the vocabulary. You have 2 pages of vocabulary. One of these has examples and non-examples on it. Remember, examples is things that are, in this case, a linear function, and non-examples are things that are not linear functions. So pause the video now, write down these words, these terms, and the information, and when you finish, restart the video. Here's our last bit of vocabulary, and it has to do with linear equation and the 3 different forms it can be written in: slope-intercept form, slope form, and standard form. So pause the video and write this information down. Restart when you're ready to move on. Alright, this is just a formula, and it's the slope formula. This is all the information that has to do with the slope formula, and everybody should be familiar with the slope formula from Algebra 1. So pause the video, write this information down, and familiarize yourself once again with the slope formula. Alright, so here is some examples where you have 2 points, 2 ordered pairs, and you have to find the slope. To find the slope, you have to use the slope formula. And you should have written it down, but if you'll remember, we basically use the lowercase m to represent slope, and it is always y2 minus y1 in the numerator and x2 minus x1 in the denominator. So normally what I do is I label each point, and I just start with the first one, x1, y1. And let me put that in blue, y1. And my x2 and my y2. Alright, now all I'm going to do is use my slope formula. I am going to take my y2 and I am going to subtract from it my y1, and I am dividing that all over by my x2 minus my x1. And when I simplify this, minus minus makes it a big old plus, so I get 5 over negative 10, so my slope here is equal to negative 1/2. Alright, pause the video now and try to find the slope of number 2 and number 3, and when you get that slope, restart the video, please. Alright, so this is what you should have gotten for the slope. So actually, you should remember that just from basic arithmetic, 0 divided by anything is 0, and it is perfectly acceptable to have a 0 slope, and you cannot divide by 0. So what that means is when you try to divide by 0, it is undefined, and you can have an undefined slope. Here's something for you to think about, and we'll discuss it tomorrow. Doesn't matter which point you label x1 and y1 and x2 and y2. Why don't you take one of the problems on the previous page and label them the opposite of what you did and try the slope formula and see what happens. You can pause the video to do this and then restart when you need to. Alright, here's something that I wanted to make sure that you remember. Whenever your slope is positive, that means the line, when you graph it, it's going to rise to the right. If it's positive, it's rising up in the positive direction. And if you get a negative slope, that means it's falling down to the right. Usually going up from left to right is positive, going down is negative. Actually, not usually, always. And finally, if you get a 0 slope, that means you have a horizontal line. An example of a horizontal line, an equation of a horizontal line is y equals 2. Your y coordinate is going to be the same in every ordered pair. If you have an undefined slope, that means that you're going to have a vertical line. An example of this is the equation x equals negative 3. It's going to have the same x coordinate in every ordered pair. Alright, so here we go with some examples of that vertical and horizontal line. If you'll remember from the last slide, basically if I said it had y equals 2, that means it has to go through the point where y is 2. And I'm not doing very good about drawing a point right there. So when I graph this, I'm going to get a horizontal line because it has to cut through the y-axis, and this is the y-axis right here. It has to cut through the y-axis at 2. So this is the graph of this line. It's a horizontal line that goes through the y-axis at y equals 2. Now see if you can figure out how to do number 2 here on your own. Pause the video, and when you get it graphed, restart the video and check your answer. If you use what you learned on the previous video, you should know that if it's x equals, this means it's going to be a vertical line, and it's a vertical line that has to cross the x-axis at x equals -3. So this is what your graph should look like. Alright, so now we're going to talk about your slope-intercept form of a linear equation. It is the y equals mx plus b, and basically it is your blueprint for graphing a line. It's what you use to create the graph. Your m is always your slope, and your b is your y-intercept. The y-intercept is where the line crosses the x-axis, and an ordered pair would look like this. So if you need to, pause the video and write this information down. Alright, so what we're going to do is an example we're going to take, and we're going to put this in slope-intercept form. And if you remember from the previous page, this is my slope-intercept form. And I am going to make my m red and my b blue, because those two values are the only thing you have to plug in to get the slope-intercept form. So first of all, my equation is going to be y equals, everything in black you're going to keep, y equals, and then my slope is 1/5. So it is 1/5 x plus, and my y-intercept, it is the y coordinate right here. So it is a -3. So my equation is y equals 1/5 x minus 3. Alright, now, slope-intercept form, like I said, is your blueprint for creating a graph. First of all, you start out with your y-intercept. It is your starting point. Y-intercept goes on y-axis. So you go down to -3 on the y-axis. That is your starting point. From that point, you use your slope. Remember, it's your rise over your run. So with the 1/5, you're going to rise up 1 and go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is my 2 points. And I can actually go backwards, down 1 and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's another point. And that is what my horribly and straight line looks like. Alright, so you try this one. I've given you the slope, I've given you the y-intercept, plug it into the formula, graph it. So pause the video, do that, and when you finish, restart and we'll see how you did. Okay, so here's what mine looks like. If you'll notice, I didn't have enough tick marks on my graph, so I just sort of extended it up. And actually my dot should be, I went up a little far. It should be down here, not that one. Alright, so that's what my graph should look like. And so should yours. Alright, here's the final example I'm going to do with you. I have an equation, but it's not in slope-intercept form. And I want to put it in slope-intercept form, which if you'll remember is my y equals mx plus b. So that means y has to be by itself. So I need y by itself on one side of the equal sign. It does not matter which side. So same thing I do when I solve an equation, I've got to get rid of everything else. So I have got to get rid of this 5x. And then I have got to get rid of this multiplication of -4, and I have to divide everything all the way across by -4. You have to divide each term. So that means those cancel out, and I'm left with just y. I have a negative and a negative, so that means it becomes positive. And 16 divided by -4 is -4. Right here is my slope-intercept form. And remember, it's your blueprint. That's why you need it. It's how to create your graph. First of all, y-intercept. It is the number without the x attached to it, and it is my starting point. So 1, 2, 3, -4. And finally, my slope is 5/4. So that means I go up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I go over 2, 3, 4. So there's my other point. And I can also, if I want to go in the opposite direction, I can go down 2, 4, 5, and over 1, 2, 3, 4. And then this is my line. Alright, children, let's try this one on your own. Put it in slope-intercept form. Use that slope-intercept form as your blueprint to graph. So pause the video, give it a shot. Restart it when you're done to check your answer. Alright, a couple things to notice on this one. It did have a negative slope, so I know my line has to fall to the right. So I can either drop down 7 places and move to the right 5, or I can go up 7 places and move to the left to the right. One of my moves has to be in the negative direction. Alright, so I want you to look at this problem here. Somebody had 2 points and had to find the slope, and they found the slope, and they did a little something wrong. What did they do wrong? And what should they have done? And how can you fix it? Let's think about this and see what you come up with. See what you can come up with, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. See ya.